to clarify, you are at Talking Green GMO, in case you're in the wrong place. No, just kidding. I'm Andy Kennedy. I'm the Program Director for the Sustainability Council. And Georgie Weber, Events Coordinator. Georgie's Posse from CMC. Sarah Jones, our Executive Director. And Carol Lacey Wilson got married on Friday. She's our Zero Waste Coordinator. Queen Zero. So thanks everybody for coming. I also want to thank our sponsors. We have New Power Fund sponsoring Talking Green all year round. Homelink Magazine also, and the Resort Group for housing our guests tonight. So thanks to them. Also here tonight we have Off the Beaten Path. And they've got a lot of books on GMO over there. Ron, thank you. Yampa Valley Farm, Yampa Valley Co-op, and Twisted Oak. So thanks all of those guys for coming. I'm going to do, and thank you all for coming and showing an interest in this, and thanks to CMC and the Students for Sustainability. And this is the Albright Family Auditorium, so thanks to CMC for donating that to us this evening. Allow me to introduce our wonderful guest speakers who have taken the time out of their schedules to come to you tonight voluntarily and give their viewpoints on GMO. On your table are some pens and paper. Please hold your questions until all four of them have spoken, just so that we can get through this. So Ann Halloran on the end down there received her master's degree in clinical nutrition in 1985 and moved to Steamboat Springs in 1987. We all know Ann for Bamboo Market, Bamboo Health Food Store, which she opened with Julie Freed in 1991. Ann is a wealth of information on nutrition and health and is an active member of the Natural Products Association, Independent Natural Foods Association, and the Non-GMO Project. Ann will be touching on the subject of GMO food testing for safety by the FDA, what health impacts do they cause, what health issues have shown up since she opened her store, and what GMO foods are on the shelves and how we can eliminate them from our diet. So thanks, Ann. To her left is Alicia McLeod. Alicia is a nutritional health coach at our local natural grocers and has a BS in dietetics and food administration, as well as an MA in clinical holistic health education. Alicia has worked in various capacities in the healthcare field, acting as a nutritionist for an international company overseeing supplement research and development, quality control, and most rewardingly, customer education. Tonight she'll be discussing labeling of GMOs with a focus on GMOs in supplements, as well as the natural grocer's viewpoints and hopes for the future. Thanks, Alicia. And to her left, Shauna Yossi is an agricultural ecologist, an anti-GMO activist that grew up in nearby Grand County, Colorado. Her research has focused on the disconnect between agricultural systems that employ transgenic crop plants and what her and many others believe to be our best and only chance at a sustainable food system, namely diversified farming systems using open-pollinated and heirloom crops. Shauna is concerned with corporate control of our food supply, loss of genetic diversity, increased agricultural pollutants, and health in pollinator species. Shauna will be speaking on agrobiodiversity, seeds, heirloom versus hybrid versus GMO, science, and the chemical impacts of pesticides like Roundup. Welcome, Shauna. And last, we have Tisha Cassida. Is that right? Last name? Okay. An advocate for food freedom and 7-year owner of That's Natural, which is based in Aspen, Colorado. Tisha has spent that time creating a database of farmers, producers, and consumers who can work together to enhance the local food economy while protecting their individual rights to consume foods and medicines of their choice. Tisha advocates for farmers, ranchers, and Coloradans to make their own decisions for their family and environment at the state and local level of government. Tisha will be covering the Know Your Farmer topic, local alternatives, and will give an overview of the Colorado database. So welcome, Tisha. Thanks, guys.
Hey, can everybody hear me all right? Okay, the first question I was going to talk about is, have there been studies done on the health effects of GMOs? And in a nutshell, no, there haven't. And in the patents that are owned by Monsanto and the large herbicide and pesticide companies, it is listed in the patent that there will be no studies done except for by the patent owners. So no, there have been no studies done. And the patent owners, the studies that they've done usually are just over a few weeks, and obviously you cannot see health effects on something over a few-week period. So in a sense, we are the test group here. We've been ingesting these foods since 1996, and the health effects that we are having, that we are seeing, we are the test group. The next issue I was going to talk about is, have there been any increases in diseases and health problems since the introduction of GMOs in 1996? And Americans get sick in a much higher percentage than in any other industrialized country. Since the 1990s, the number of Americans suffering from at least three chronic illnesses has doubled. Illnesses that were once considered rare are now closing in on being at epidemic levels. Some statistics here. Autism now affects 1 in 88 children compared to 1 in 25,000 in the 1970s. Type 2 diabetes rates increased 176% between 1990 and 2010. That's only a 20-year period. Celiac disease is 4 times more prevalent than it was in the 1980s. Allergies, particularly food allergies, have been increasing steadily since the 1970s. And I'm sure, and I'm sure a lot of you that are older, my age, I'm in my 50s, growing up, we did not really know anybody with food allergies. Maybe there was 1 or 2 of them. But growing up, we could eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We could eat pretty much anything we wanted. And I don't even think in my college years I knew anybody that had any allergies, food allergies. And now everybody that knows that has kids that are school age, that you are not allowed to bring peanut butter or peanut products into the school for fear of somebody accidentally having some of those foods and going into an anaphylactic shock. So it's getting to the point where there has to be like peanut-free zones and allergen-free zones in schools to protect the children. 2 of the most common food allergies are soy and corn, which are the 2 GMO crops that are being grown in the U.S. right now. They are in the majority of processed foods. So if you buy processed foods, if you ever look at the label, chances are there is some form of soy or corn in it. It may be soy lecithin, it may be a textured soy protein, corn syrup solids, corn syrup. And these are prevalent in most processed foods. Even the so-called health food type processed foods could very easily have these in there. GMO soy contains 7 times higher rates of known soy allergens than organic soy. And also the GMO soybeans, they have a cross-reactivity with peanut allergy. And so the belief is, with the introduction of these GMO soybeans, they are causing the amount of peanut allergies to skyrocket. And the U.S. peanut allergies doubled between 1998 and 2002. It's a 4-year period. So for people that think that there may or may not be a connection, it's kind of hard to ignore these statistics. And one of the things that GMO foods, particularly soy, does is it reduces the amount of digestive enzymes in your intestinal tract. It slows your digestion, and when you have a slow digestion, it increases your chances of developing food allergies. And some of the health problems that there have been some studies done on lab mice, but these are not anything that is put out that the FDA considers studies that they're going to take into consideration. But when these studies have been done on the mice, they have found that the mice have suffered from liver damage, massive tumors, reproductive health problems such as infertility and sterility, DNA damage, and abnormal cell growth, also known as cancer. And also more than half the offspring of these GMO-fed mice died within 3 weeks. And also, some people don't realize it, but having a healthy gut, having healthy intestinal flora, is our first line of defense for our immune systems. If you do not have a healthy gut, you are not a healthy person. It just opens you up for having all kinds of different diseases, and it really affects your immune system. And also, we produce the majority of serotonin in our guts. And so when our intestinal flora and our guts are not healthy, it can cause emotional problems. And, you know, we've just seen a rise in the use of pharmaceutical drugs being used for all kinds of emotional problems. And, you know, our gut is also considered our second brain. And this is something I wasn't aware of until the last few years, but it's something that we really need to take into consideration. And then also, I wanted to talk about the pesticides used in Roundup, which is what is used on GMO crops. And do these pose a threat? And Roundup contains the chemical glyphosate, which has been linked to over 20 adverse health effects, including birth defects, infertility, and cancer. It is found in high concentrations in the GI tracts of livestock and in our rain and groundwater. And I just read this today, that last month the EPA announced that it will be allowing Monsanto to have larger amounts of traces of glyphosate in farm foods. So they just raised the amount of traces of this chemical that can be on foods last month. This is despite studies linking the chemicals to diseases such as cancer, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, heart disease, obesity, depression, digestive disorders, autism, autoimmune disease, IBS, MS, ALS, colitis, and Alzheimer's disease. And, you know, one of the things that was supposed to be great about GMO foods is it was going to be able to reduce the amount of herbicides being used, but just the opposite has happened. And by 2004, farmers used an estimated 86% more herbicides compared to non-GMO farmers. As a result of exposure to glyphosate, farmers began suffering from high incidences of IBS, that's intestinal bowel syndrome, irritable bowel syndrome. So it really goes to almost all these problems go to the gut. They also were suffering from chronic fatigue, headache, lethargy, skin ailments, such as itchy skin and rashes. You know, and I think that one of the things that we really have to look at is that the increase in the amount of ADD, autism, cognitive problems, learning disabilities, all of these can be linked to GMO foods. And children that are autistic or have Asperger's disease, when they go on a gluten-free and non-GMO diet, most parents see a rapid improvement in a lot of their symptoms. And so how can we eliminate GMO foods in our diet? Well, avoiding corn and soy, unless it's organic, reading labels, trying to find organic, non-GMO certified local foods is the best way that you can avoid it. But it's so insidious. You really do have to be careful. And not, you know, going to a friend's house, you're not going to say, oh, by the way, is this GMO-free food that we're having here, or when you're traveling. And one of the problems is once these, when the pesticide glyphosate gets into your system, it actually gets into your intestines and gets into your DNA, and nobody knows how to get it out of your system. Even if you quit eating the food, we just don't know. At some point, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, does it go away? These are just all questions that we cannot answer. We don't know. And my teacher in school, Dr. Bernard Jensen, he used to say, if you have a healthy gut, you have a healthy life. And we're looking at a nation that we're going down a road that is frightening. And I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to scare anybody, but I just think it's really important that we do something about it. And the main thing you can do is stop buying GMO foods. And if there's no demand, then it won't be produced anymore. So, we can look at what our European friends are doing. And also, just On the average, organic foods are 25% more nutritious than GMO foods. So just from a nutritional standpoint, they are so superior. And I just wanted to end with a quote from Andrew Kimball, who's the Executive Director of the International Center for Technology Assessment. And what he has said is the FDA has placed the interest of a handful of biotech companies ahead of their responsibility to protect public health. By failing to require testing and labeling of GMO foods, the agency has made consumers unknowing guinea pigs for potential harmful, unregulated food substances.
Hi. I would like to give the perspective of grocery stores, natural groceries in particular. The thing about a grocery store is that we rely on our vendors to tell us what is in the product. The manufacturers are the ones who have to begin this push, and they are. There's a lot of manufacturers out there who are proactive in the non-GMO movement, and for good reason, because these are the products, hopefully, that you and I are aiming for. These are the products that we want to use, we want to feed ourselves, our families, and I mean, I didn't know everything and said by any means before I got here, but it's a no-brainer to me, you know, to avoid GMOs. And but from the store's perspective, we have to ask our vendors to have the integrity to let us know if there are GMO ingredients in their products. So, for example, in the supplement part of the store, I know that part of the store the best, there are several vendors that started out with whole food, and they never had to change anything in their products. They started out non-GMO, organic ingredients, period, which is wonderful. Those are my favorite products. Then there are companies who have the integrity to retrofit every single product they carry. And that is a hefty order. Because some of these supplements, like the multivitamins, can have 50, 60 ingredients. And what you have to do is, as a company, you have to go to every single raw ingredient supplier and say, I need to see your certificate of analysis, and I need it to say that it's non-GMO. And so for 60 ingredients for 30, 50 products, that's a lot of work. But if you see out of stocks on the shelf, sometimes that's the reason why. And when I am able to tell somebody, you know why we're out of this? It's because they're retrofitting so that every ingredient in their product is free GMO ingredients. So that, to me, nobody has said, that's not okay. Like, okay, I get it. That's a good thing. So natural grocers, of course, first wants to see the labeling. Longer term, it definitely is to see the sustainable farming. You know, to have us as a community shift toward sustainable farming instead of the mega farms. And I know these two ladies will speak more on that. But that is definitely the longer-term goal for natural grocers. And so when it comes to labeling, it's not that difficult to request, in my opinion. You know, put on the label, maybe GMO. You know, put on the label if you don't have, you know, every ingredient verified. Put a little asterisk and a little note and says maybe GMO. Because you and I look on the label. We look and we see, and if it says may contain GMO, I'm going to put it back and I'm going to find one that is clean. So, I mean, the bottom line here is we vote with our dollars, right? We vote with our votes? Yes, we vote with our dollars. So let's stop supporting the GMO crops. And, you know, as I've said before, if a product in our store sits on the shelf because it's full of GMO, it's a GMO cornflakes or something, and gets dusty, so be it. Isn't that wonderful? Eventually we will discontinue the product. Please ask us to discontinue these products by not buying them. You know, it's that simple. In our store, we have, you know, it's a mix right now because we didn't know we were getting pigs to this GMO project, you know, test for human beings. So it's a phasing out of GMO by ignoring it with our dollars. That's my opinion. So I did want to piggyback on what Ann said about the nutrition in the non-GMO crops. I also saw a report that said, it was out of Canada, it said that the non-GMO corn has 56 times more magnesium than the GM corn. And if you think about it, a healthy plant, getting into your stuff, a healthy plant that doesn't have these herbicides and pesticides put on it has to be stronger, right, to survive. We want strong plants because it's those phytonutrients that we're eating to boost our health. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer to me to just let the plants be, let them fight for their life, you know? The strong ones survive. And then, again, let's vote with our dollars and abstain from voting with our dollars. Thank you.
Is it on? Oh, there we go. Okay. So, I want to welcome you all to this talk and welcome you all to the science fiction future that we're living in. Where the world's biggest chemical company is also the world's biggest seed distributor. Where many of the most widely eaten crop plants originated in a corporate lab, or even worse, a taxpayer-funded university lab. Where profit trumps human and environmental health. Where corporate accountability is so minimal, while small farmers struggle to make ends meet. Where we now have super bugs, super weeds, and super greed. All of these reasons are why talks like this are so important. To shed some light on such a complex issue. It's really complex. There's so many unanswered questions. So firstly, I'm going to discuss a few basics about GMOs and then kind of examine some of the damage that we're starting to see to our agricultural ecosystems and how that contrasts with a sustainable vision for our agricultural future. So what are GMOs and transgenic organisms? So kind of around the mid-'80s, the first GM crop was a tobacco plant. The GM crops that are currently being grown and are on the market are corn, soy, canola. Cotton is, obviously for clothing. There is a GM zucchini. There's also GM papaya. GM sugar beets just recently got approved. And then now there's a GM alfalfa, which is a really big deal for organic growers. So there was a GM potato at one time. There was a GM tomato. But both of those are no longer on the market. There is a GM wheat in the works, which is pretty scary. And that's set to be released probably sometime in the next 5 years or so. There's also a GM rice in the works, which some people might have heard about. It's called golden rice. And this is going to be a rice that produces beta-carotene and has the goal of potentially reducing childhood deaths and childhood blindness in third world countries. That's a big problem with vitamin A deficiency. But the vast majority of crops that are grown in this country are either called BT or they're called Roundup Ready. So what BT crops are, just real quick, is BT is a bacterium called Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a soil-dwelling bacterium that produces a natural insecticidal toxin. So what they did is they spliced DNA of the BT bacterium into corn, soy, and I believe cotton. It's actually been a biological control in agricultural systems for a long time. And now that it's been spliced into corn, cotton, and soy, the idea was to provide resistance to the European corn borer, the cotton bollworm, and the corn rootworm, among a few other pests. Unfortunately for this type of technologies, evolution happens. And the genetically modified plants don't evolve, ecosystems still continue to evolve. So now what we're starting to see is superbugs cropping up that are resistant to BT, which starts to be a real problem for organic growers who have used BT for years as an insecticide, as a natural insecticide. So according to the research that I've looked at, BT crops have actually reduced pesticide use, because obviously you don't need to spray a pesticide on crops if the pesticide is inside the plant, which is how it works. So really, I mean, by moving away from industrial agriculture, by moving away from industrial meat, we could reduce pesticide use that way, instead of having to have a pesticide ingrained into our plants. So the Roundup Ready crops are corn, soy, cotton, canola, sugar beets, and alfalfa. So that's obviously a really convenient situation for a company like Monsanto. They own the patent on a lot of these seeds, and then they own the patent on Roundup, so they can sell the seeds, they can sell the chemicals. It's perfect for them. So there was also a soil-dwelling bacterium that was found to be resistant to the herbicide Roundup. They spliced that into all these previously mentioned crops. The reasoning behind Roundup Ready crops is to reduce tillage. So you don't have to till as much if you're just spraying the entire field indiscriminately with an herbicide. Which obviously that leads to a buildup of more toxic herbicide in our soils, in our waterways, in our bodies, in our children's bodies. And then once again, evolution happens in those ecosystems. Plants don't evolve, but the weeds do. And so now we're seeing super weeds that are resistant to Roundup. And I'm not sure what Monsanto is doing about that. I think they've started to change their chemical composition a little bit to be able to get these new super weeds. So those are the main two genetically modified crops we have in this country, the Roundup Ready and the BT. And a lot of times they're actually both. They call it stacked traits. So how do these differ from a hybrid? So hybrids were kind of the industrial agriculture darlings before GMOs came along. And without turning this into like a boring genetics class, really quickly what a hybrid is two pure lines that have had any heterozygous genes bred out of them. And then those two are crossed to get the new generation with the hybrid vigor. Hybrid seed production is extremely labor intensive. A lot of it happens in third world countries where labor is really cheap. Hardly any of it's produced in this country. You can't save the seed from a hybrid. If you grow a Burpee's Big Boy tomato, you can't go and save that seed and then grow it the next year because it reverts back to traits from its parent and gets all weird and messed up. So, that's a problem with hybrids. You can't save the seed, just like obviously you can't save the seed from a GM crop, not only because of patenting, but because if you tried to regrow it the next year, it wouldn't come true to what it's supposed to be. So, now, our open pollinated, our heirloom, our traditional seeds, these are the seeds that are our greatest human accomplishment. The seeds that have evolved along with us over the last 10 to 15,000 years of our collective agricultural history. So the diversity that we've created is astounding, and it's really something to be proud of. But we'll never know how truly profound it is because a lot of these seeds have been lost and gone extinct, and it's really unfortunate. So just a few stats. According to the USDA, we've lost 95% of our heirloom cabbage varieties, 96% of our heirloom field corns, 94% of our traditional pea varieties, about 85% of our traditional tomato varieties, and about 80% of the apple varieties that once existed in this country. So that's to say nothing of beans, peppers, lettuces, broccoli, cauliflower, squashes, other greens. All those seeds have been lost. And the rapid adoption of GMOs has contributed to this loss through genetic pollution, and just through people not maintaining, varieties that might have been in their family for a long time and stuff like that. So why are these seeds, these heirloom seeds, so crucial that we built an underground storage facility in northern Norway just to protect them? It's because we're facing a future on a planet with a changing climate, with uncountable local and regional weather variables. We need crop plants that can adapt over time, that can change, evolve to fit a drier climate in some places, wetter climates in some places, that can evolve to, go up against different pest and weed pressures that are popping up in some places due to climate change. I personally dream of a day when we have a new generation of heirlooms, bred by a new generation of farmers and breeders. We could someday have a beet called Circle's Best, or broccoli called Fraser's Finest. There is hope as long as we realize the vast challenges that we do face in righting our agricultural system and simply get to work creating solutions. And that's, to me, what this talk is really about, is examining our food system as a whole, not just getting the labeling part. That is important to get GMOs labeled. But we need to kind of use the fear and outrage over GMOs as a catalyst to examine our industrial agricultural system. GMOs could not have integrated so seamlessly into our system were it not already so industrialized, so consolidated. I mean, they just fit right in there. We lost our small, diversified, healthy farms long before GMOs came along, in 1996. We only have slid further down the slope of centralized, large-scale, fossil fuel-intensive agriculture since GMOs came on the market, but we were already on that path. Biotechnology swept onto the scene with little to no testing, like it's already been said. Global chronic hunger, which was originally the point of GMOs, was to decrease global hunger. It has not decreased. And really, you can't expect the same plants to work as well as they do in Iowa and India and Mexico. And it's just absurd to think the same gene profile could do as well in every climatic situation all over the globe. So gene transfer has occurred into polluted heirloom crops. And what I mean by that is, say you have a whole field of GM corn, that pollen can blow for hundreds of miles. So of course, if somebody's growing heirloom field corn 2 miles away, that's going to get polluted by GM pollen. And that's been a big problem, down in Mexico, where there's a lot of land races of traditional corn, where they're now starting to see GM genes popping up in their old varieties down there. And with losing those old varieties, you start to lose cultural diets around the world, and that's a big loss too. And one of the least studied impacts of widespread planting of GM crops is the effect on the soil microbial communities. And not only because the indiscriminate spraying of Roundup, but also because you're introducing a brand new protein chain into those soil microbial communities. And I think they're starting to see really negative effects on soils. I mean, obviously because of the Roundup, but also because it's just a brand new plant with different protein chains that you're introducing. Also, just one thing I want to point out, there's a really scary change in higher education. I mean, there used to be traditional plant breeding programs in different colleges around the country. Now there's none. There's not a single traditional plant breeding program you could go to college for. There's organizations that put on classes or weekend workshops or stuff like that. But you couldn't go and get a bachelor's degree with emphasis in plant breeding right now. You could certainly go become, I don't know what they call it, biotechnologist, or, you could certainly go to school and get into producing GM crops. I mean, that's all over. But if you wanted to become a traditional plant breeder, that's literally impossible to find. So what can we do? Well, I just want to show you guys, this is a seed catalog. Maybe some of you have seen this. I know it's huge. By becoming a member of the organization Seed Savers Exchange, you could have access to this members network where people actually trade seeds. A lot of people ask for a small price, but these are people from all over the world that are listing heirloom varieties that they've maintained, and you could do that in your own gardens. I mean, I know it's harder in mountain communities, but actually, some things grow great here. You know, I mean, it's different, a little warmer over here, but I encourage people to look into this organization, to maybe become a member. It's not that much. It's a small amount of money each year. It's a nonprofit. It's one of the biggest seed banks in the world. They're doing the really hard work of maintaining all these varieties that basically aren't being maintained by people's families anymore. And that's something you can do. Grow a garden, save seeds. It feels small, but you know, if you're growing a head of lettuce, that's one less head of lettuce that got shipped from California, you know. That's one less head of broccoli. That's one less thing that's getting shipped here. And in fact, I believe that us in the mountains have even a greater responsibility to garden, to save seeds. We have an amazing quality of life here, and we aren't as exposed to a lot of the negative agricultural side effects as a lot of people all over the country are. And we need to start taking a little bit more responsibility for ourselves. Growing gardens here, buying locally produced meat and eggs and dairy, that's extremely important. Because a lot of these GM crops, in fact, the vast majority of these GM crops are going straight to industrial meat and egg and dairy operations. So if you can buy local meat, local eggs and dairy, which is something that is easily produced in the mountains, please do it if you eat meat and eat dairy. So by just choosing to live in a place so geographically isolated, we need to start taking a little bit more responsibility for our own food security. Garden, start saving seeds, raise chickens in your backyard, things like that. They feel small, but it actually builds up over time. And that's all we can do. It works. Thanks.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming out this evening. This is a great crowd, and thank you guys for putting it on. This is fantastic. Again, my name is Tisha Cassidy, and my small business is That's Natural. I started it right after I graduated from college, when I started my master's, and I'll celebrate 8 years with the company on October 17th. And I started my business because I thoroughly believed that I could not only make money, but do something really great for my community and my country by providing information to people about sustainability, what that word means. And for me, the biggest thing that means is healthy food and making sure that we can raise families in a country that's healthy. My big point is food freedom, and do you think, as an individual, you have the right to choose what you consume? And I, as a firm believer in natural rights, believe that I do have the right to consume what I want when I want. I have the right to put whatever I want into my body for food or medicine, and I don't think that any level of government should be able to dictate that to me. That includes things like genetically modified organisms that were put into our food supply out of nowhere without any of us knowing, and as you guys have mentioned, we're the guinea pigs for. So I think the United States federal government has overstepped its bounds by allowing GMOs into Americans' food supply without us knowing. A lot of what I talk about goes back to law, constitutional law, and natural law. This is different than administrative law or statutory law, and that's a whole lesson in itself in a philosophical debate. But I believe in natural law and constitutional law. So I think if you have time and energy, you should put it towards something that creates versus destroys. So I kind of think that our federal government has already allowed this to happen. You guys are very familiar probably with the revolving door between Monsanto and government agencies. A lot of people in government have already worked for big multinational corporations. I don't think we're going to get a lot of feedback from them that's beneficial to us as consumers as far as a labeling initiative or getting it out of the food supply. Same thing with our, I will call them legislators. I don't think they're actually being representatives of the people, but I think they're politicians, a lot of them, and I don't think they're going to be very helpful either because a lot of them are receiving money from these same multinational corporations. Of course they're going to vote for these people and not for the individuals. So instead of barking up that tree, I think that our biggest and greatest power, as these guys have all mentioned, is to buy local and put our money where our mouth is. So the first way to do that is actually how you spend your money, and of course that kind of goes back to the database that I've been trying to build as a company. There's other organizations that are working on this as well. I'm sure just like the Sustainability Council, you have local community organizations that are great resources for local producers. I think that this is our greatest strength. And taking the time and energy to find out who your farmer is, even if it's for 1 or 2 food products, is your absolute greatest power as a consumer. And you think you're just one person doing one little thing, it makes a huge difference, especially for farmers and ranchers. I think that these are the people that deserve our money. That's our vote. They deserve that. And if you can take the time to say, okay, this month I'm going to try and find a local producer to provide my hamburger meat. This month I'm going to try and find a producer to provide my herbs. Or if you take the initiative to grow food yourself, it is the absolute greatest thing you could do for your community and country. And I think that we should support that as a community however we can. But these farmers and ranchers can use your money, and that's really how you support them. The other way, of course, is by affecting local law. And I have a little handout over on the table, but in it I put the 9th and 10th Amendment of the Constitution. And basically, both of these amendments say if there's anything in the Constitution that hasn't been talked about, rights are reserved to individuals and to the states. So if there is a federal policy coming down the pipe, or just a federal action coming down the pipe that affects us individually as consumers, we absolutely have constitutional authority to nullify that law, or to say in our local government, we don't want this. We don't want this to happen. And with genetically modified organisms, it's really difficult because they're kind of already there. But there's an example of Sedgwick, Maine, who had a food sovereignty law, and in their little community, they actually declared, this isn't specifically for genetically modified organisms, but they're basically saying that individuals and farmers and producers absolutely have the right to create exchanges among themselves. And we have to preserve that right as individuals and make sure we can always consume what we want. That means if we don't want to consume genetically modified organisms, there's nothing anywhere that says we have to. We can make the decisions ourselves. And if for some reason there is some law or some executive order or some type of policy that comes down the pipe that makes it impossible or difficult for us to make individual choices as consumers, we can call upon our local and state officials to help us either nullify bad laws that are already in place, or create local ordinances and local policies that protect our individual right to consume what we like. So, and I also made some copies as an example of that food sovereignty law, in case any of you want to pick it up, and there's also a link on my website and that website that's up there. So, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with a top-down approach. I am totally for labeling GMOs. I think it would be fantastic. We had a little discussion earlier about the potential problems with that. Even now, even if they have a labeling requirement, these companies have ways of getting around those labeling requirements. So even if we got something like that passed, which would be fantastic, I still think that our greatest resistance, again, is shopping local. And again, there's nothing wrong with talking to your representative, talking to people with executive authority about what you want. That's the top-down approach, but I think more powerful is going to your neighbor and going to your local farmer and figuring out what you can purchase from them. I think that's much more powerful. So every day, you have 24 hours in a day to decide what you do with your time and how you spend your energy. I have always, well, not always, but I'm learning that it's really important to spend your time creating versus destroying. And if you use your energy to put forward and to create and to make something happen versus to tear something down or change something, I think that we'll get better results. So although I think it's great to fight it and fight GMOs, I think it's even more powerful to fight back by supporting local farmers and producers. And Colorado is just a fantastic state where we have immense amounts of resources, both with agriculture and energy, and we can declare food freedom and food sovereignty. And I hope that all of you will explore you know, what 1 or 2 food products you can incorporate into your daily routine where you're supporting a local farmer. And it would be fabulous if any of you decide to start a farm. And if you face bureaucratic red tape, you know, give me a call and we'll fight back and we'll try and make it easy for us to declare our food freedom.
Very thorough. A couple of things I failed to mention. The food on your table is provided by Ann and Family Market. It's all GMO free. Katie also brought some food from her farm as well. She made some zucchini bread, so make sure you get some of that. At our garden tour last month, he mentioned that we have a seed exchange at the library now. Do you remember that?
We don't.
Okay.
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 That's all it has.
Okay, that's where I thought I hadn't heard that, and then I went, huh. So all the links that the ladies have mentioned tonight are on our website. Whatever isn't on our website will be posted on our website tonight, and then we will post a blog post about this as well. But one more link that I wanted to show you guys is a book. Ron, do you want to talk about the book? Pull that up. So that's off the Beaten Path website, and the book. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll just take a couple minutes of time. I feel like the guy who slept in the Holiday Inn Express last night and now is going to pretend to be an expert. So let me offer this in the spirit of read more about it. So I brought up several things with me from the bookstore, a number of books. I've also brought, for those of you who don't know, before I was a bookseller and a bookstore owner, I was a physician scientist and served as a senior executive in, yes, multinational companies developing medicines, creating medicines. And sometime 12 or 13 years ago, I got asked, because of that experience, to serve on a committee that was called Safety First for Biotechnology Products. And that committee worked over 3 years to try to create a regulatory framework for the development and approval of biotechnology products. I brought with me, and I have a few copies on the table, of a paper we wrote in Nature Biotechnology now 10 years ago that describes a framework for the regulation of these kinds of products, including genetically modified foods. It's sad to say that most of that framework is not in place today. And I think we would be better off if it were. But I brought a copy of it for anybody's interested in reading it. As I read it last night, I said, you know, we did some good work 10 years ago, and it's a shame that most of it has not been applied. A number of books that I'll call attention to: Pharmacology, very much about organic gardening and how it affects health and healing. A book called Gaining Ground, which is about the story of farmers markets, local food, and saving the family farm. And a number of other books on the table that are really about local production of food, organic gardening. The book I wanted to spend most time talking about is one that I discovered in the last week and have been reading. It's called Tomorrow's Table. It's what's up on the screen. This is a book written by Pamela Ronald and Raoul Adamchak. Pamela is a plant geneticist. Raoul is an organic farmer. They're both professors at UC Davis. They've written this book about 5 years ago, essentially to describe the way they see a world of agricultural production that takes advantage of the good aspects of genetic engineering and organic farming, and they see how they actually can be brought together to create an ecosystem for food production that would be more productive, safer, healthier, do all the things that you think about when you think about organic gardening if brought together. Very readable book, so a lot here about the tools of genetic engineering, so she gets into the science, but she has a way of explaining it that's very straightforward and almost story-like. And there's a chapter on the tools of organic gardening in the same way. So if you want to learn about what these tools are, this is a book that I would recommend. Thank you.
And maybe in lieu of us running around and holding the mic for your questions, if you could just repeat the question before you answer it, and then who has questions? I know there's questions out there. Go for it.
Nobody discussed the development of animal GMOs. I was curious if anyone would like to address the salmon that's facing that's up for market soon.
I don't know much about it.
Well, I know is this on?
Yeah.
You're talking about the frankenfish? And that's a genetically modified salmon that grows something ridiculous, like 40 times larger than a regular salmon in like a 2-week period. And also the reason that we eat salmon is for the healthy omegas, and it doesn't have the healthy omegas. And as a matter of fact, it is found that the meat of the fish can be actually detrimental to your health. And it's supposed to be maintained somewhere where it can't get into the wild, but it was accidentally released into the wild about 6 months ago. So we'll see if it starts.
But on that, I did hear that it can't breed with the natural fish.
Yeah, I don't think it can. I think it's something that, yeah. So that's about all I know. And also, I also know that like 99 out of 100 people say they would never buy it. So maybe it'll never be actually for commercial sale.
I saw a question over there, yeah.
I have a question. I'm a local healthcare provider, and I think, for always, everybody here, I think, is at an unlikely point, which is great. We're here together, listening to what you have to say, but, without sounding crass, you're kind of preaching to the choir here. So I would just asking everyone here to maybe think of something that you do personally to get this information out, because there's a lot of people that don't get this in the community as well. So I think where I lack is when these laws come up, like Prop 37 in California, where they're saying, we're going to legalize that, GMO past this label. And that law does not go through, and it fails. So, I think one of the great things is, don't look for a GMO. Look for the great products out there that advertise non-GMO. And there's, most of them are out there doing that. But where can we get the information, like, readily, like, there's something coming up, and Tisha, maybe you can help, and I'm sure it's on your website, which I'm just familiar with now, that when something political comes up that we have to really address, each one of us, if each one of us touched 2 other people and said, this information's here, go to this website, and, we would be tripling the amount of people that are aware of this. I just recently did some work at Walgreens, passing out, here's non-GMO food, which of course they have none of that in there. And none of the people in there knew what a non-GMO or a GMO was. So that's frightening. So, and what you were saying, you don't want to panic people, but if we're at epidemic, it's frightening what's going on.
Yeah, and I would recommend getting online and looking at the Non-GMO Project, because they have all kinds of like worksheets if you want to go to schools and talk to the children, talk to the teachers at your schools. It has organizational tools that you can use. Petitions, they give you alerts when something's coming up that you need to be aware of.
I teach this all the time. I had a 3-year-old at my clinic, apple or a donut, and the 3-year-olds get it. They get it. It's the police officers that say, well, I'll take an apple or a kind of reaching out, and I find it a moral responsibility, personally, that we get this out. So thank you, everybody, for your knowledge.
Well, and it's up to what you just said, the fact that you stood at a Walgreens and did that. You probably affected a couple people, and it's about citizens doing it, individuals, and supporting local media. I used to publish a magazine, and it took people advertising to keep that publication going. So if any of you own small businesses and if you have a local resource to advertise in, support these local media people and try and get the word out that way. You know, I think it's really powerful.
People like who? Like the radio or you know,
Anything. Radio is powerful, but I'm sure you have local community newspaper of some nature, or hopefully a newspaper that isn't owned by a huge conglomerate, which most of them are. But, you know, anytime you see small media, you know, try and support it however you can, and that helps get the word out. And of course, by supporting them by advertising, they can help get more information out that's not part of the regular, you know,
So
stuff.
on your website, you have like, hey, in California, this is going on out here. That was huge news and no one knew about it. It got swept under the carpet. It just got swept under the carpet when, you know, the gay rights marriage, which I'm all for, which is amazing stuff. But the GMO, Monsanto's not going to get sued now for all the health problems that are happening. You know, these little things are going through, and we don't know about it. And we got to bring it to the forefront. I mean, I think the quality is amazing, but if our food is being poisoned, there is going to be ignorance running around and get married, you know?
I'd like to comment on that. I think a letter to the editor or a letter to the editorial board is a great way to make your impact on that. And then here's the Non-GMO Project's website. The links to some of the call to action websites are on our website as well. Like I said, we'll put some more up there as well. So I think the call to action is something that you could send to your email list personally. This video will be up online too if you want to send them a link to that. But I think, I mean, I agree that really reaching out to the pilot and telling them that this is what you want to hear about,
I'll do that.
you know, I think it's better news than hot bodies, in my opinion. But
Everybody's on Facebook, those videos.
yeah.
Hi, I have a suggestion for the choir who's in attendance today. My name is Paul William, I'm the board of YPSC. And one thing that's real easy for you to do is to mark your calendar. I think it's December 12th, right? Pretty sure it's December 12th, YPSC, and the library will be showing the film Genetic Roulette. And if you want to tell two friends to come to that free film, you would be doing the community a great service. And if you don't know anything about the film Genetic Roulette, all you have to do is Google it. I watched the film, and it talks a lot about what has already been said here. And this would be another way to raise the level of awareness in the community.
Can't we do that movie sooner?
Jenny's at the library. She's in charge of that.
On May 25th, there was a march against Monsanto. It wasn't really on the news. It was very small, like 20 seconds. I was there. Were you guys there? All over the globe it happens, and I think that just talking to my friends and family about it, closes our Facebook, it made a little bit of a difference. Even though it is screaming people eating McDonald's.
We're going to do that again October 12th. It's worldwide October 12th. And if it was to say they're marching at it has a lot of information about it. A lot of
Barb, you want to mention a place at the table?
So I work for now at Northwest Colorado, and it's interesting to hear what you said about support your local farmers, because one of the things we're doing in this work is we have a Northwest Colorado Food Coalition that is really addressing some of these issues and what in our food system we want to make. We want to have a resilient food system, a sustainable, resilient food system in our county, and hopefully we can branch that out to other counties. So we'd love, if you want more information about that, please let me know. But I know Tracy has been working really hard on the Napa Valley Co-op, It's a place that you can know your food, know your farmer, because we have local food on there. There's not a lot of produce because we don't have a lot of produce in this community, so we're working on it. And we're working on it. There's not a lot like that. There's some, and we're working on getting more. And so there's an example. I'll let you talk more about that, obviously, so I messed that up. Also, I'm going to show in this film A Place at the Table in conjunction with the Sustainability Council on October 22nd. And at that point, I will be sharing some of the things that we found from our Routt County food assessment that's really interesting about our food secure population in this county. So I invite you to join us for that as well.
Thanks, Barb. What was your question? Live well, Colorado.
Live well.
Yeah, I just have a question because I've heard so many mixed answers for this, for the labeling aspect of GMOs. I've heard that from, if you buy organic, you're not going to have a problem with GMOs, and then I've heard the opposite from like pretty good sources. And I'm curious if you guys know off the top of your head what it actually is. How can you tell? Because
organic.
you can buy the non-GMO certified the label on like say these chips that are around everywhere, but then you can't necessarily, if you buy organic, doesn't guarantee it's a non-GMO crop.
Well, it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, organic in definition is non-GMO.
Right, and I've heard that there's gray area.
But this did happen to me. I went to a Whole Foods when I was in Arizona, bought the Whole Foods brand corn chips that had the non-GMO project label, got them back to the condo, and I looked at the ingredients, and it just said corn, soy/canola oil, and it did not say organic. And the reason that they got away with that is because Whole Foods is a member of the non-GMO project, but that particular product was GMO. And like an idiot, well,
Because it could have
say.
been a corn variety that it wasn't necessarily a GM crop. You know what I mean?
Well, then it should have
It's not
said
organic.
non-GMO. It just,
Yeah.
because
Did it say member of the?
it just said member of.
There.
Under ingredients, there was nothing that said non-GMO, and that concerns me, because I've seen people that have worked at different places that have gone underground and taken pictures and said, this is a GMO product, and it's called bait and switch. So obviously I didn't have it tested, but
Right.
why didn't it say it was non-GMO? Especially canola.
Yeah.
Canola, you really have to be
Right,
concerned.
yeah.
I have a question in the back.
Hi, I was wondering if you guys know whether or not Sodexo, the company that supplies food for CNC, gets crops from a non-GMO, or gets food from a non-GMO crop
They get their food from Cisco.
from Cisco.
Yeah.
I work there, so I
Are there
know.
companies, like large companies that supply food for things like colleges, like universities, and prisons, and the army, do they have non-GMO food sources? Like large companies that can supply that?
Yeah.
Go for it.
That's what I'm thinking.
Well, even if it is more expensive, at some point we have to change our mindset about, if we're going to put our money where our mouth is and we're feeding our children and our youth with foods that are, not good for them, how are we supposed to tell them when they turn a certain age that, okay, now, life's really expensive, you have to buy all your textbooks, you have to pay for school, and guess what, if you want to be healthy, you also have to pay the extra cost for that, too. So if we don't, raise our youth with foods that are good for them, and we can't, trust that the institutions are putting them in good hands, how are we supposed to change the mindset? Doesn't it start with our youth and our schools?
Yeah.
And to answer your question about if there's some food service on the Front Range in Colorado Springs at Colorado College, there is one, I believe it's called Bon Appetit, and they have an excellent model for supplying that school with local foods, and it would be fantastic if a group of students here could contact them and figure out that model. I mean, obviously you're in a different climate and you'll have different things available to you, but they're doing some amazing things at Colorado College as far as their food supply goes. So that might be something you want to look into.
Marcia.
I'm Marcia Rockmore from the Agricultural Alliance. where it's coming from, where it's going to, and we all have to make a living doing this. And none of us want to put out unhealthy food because we are all concerned about our families as well. Also in Rock County, you have a wonderful model that most of you probably aren't even aware of. There's a little South Rock school down here called Morocco High School, where their FFA program is teaching hydroponic, aeroponic, and traditional agriculture, and they are feeding part of their school program is being fed with that. You have Brighton School that is really exploring this very kind of thing. And then you have your local ranchers and farmers that are trying to get more products into this community all the time and are having some roadblocks. And that's one of the things the Community Ag Alliance is working on is this networking. Barb referenced the Food Coalition. They're doing a lot of work on this. Yampa Valley Sustainability Council is doing some things. So what I would ask of you before you all get real excited and go out and decide to have a new movement is that you come and talk to some of us that have been doing this for the last 3-4 years and really get a handle on what is being done and what we need help with. So let's not reinvent the wheel on the things that are being done. Sustainability Council and Ag Alliance happen to be in the same office down on 141 9th Street. And we welcome you to stop in any time and visit with us about some of the things that we know are going on here. We know how to get a hold of Barb, and we're also great partners with CSU Extension. So please come and help us do the right things here.
Thanks, Mark. Tish, I don't know if you can speak more to this. I found this as a sponsor on your website, and it was new to me. I don't know, Marcia, if you've probably heard of them, because they've been around a long time, but it may be an avenue for sustainable schools to think about. I know your garden idea is something that's still in the works, so that might be a good funding source for you guys. Go ahead, Tisha, sorry.
So, yeah, SARE stands for Sustainable Agriculture Research Education, and about 4.5 years ago, I was awarded a grant from them to create a curriculum on sustainable agriculture for 1st and 5th graders. And we did this in Pueblo County, and we also were awarded a grant to do a farm tour in Pueblo County. But now I sit on their Communication Steering Committee, and this is, although I do bash the federal government often, and I'm not afraid to say that, the USDA SARE Committee has a fabulous grant program for producers, farmers and ranchers, and I am not one to boast about, the federal government giving money, but they actually give money directly to farmers and producers, and they create some really great research that I think is beneficial for people. So if you are thinking about becoming a farmer, if you're already a farmer, if you have something here at your school, or if you know of organizations that are looking for grant monies, this is a tremendous resource that is very simple as far as the grant application process, and then the people that you would work with are just wonderful, down-to-earth people that genuinely want to help with sustainable agriculture. So thanks for bringing that up.
And I thought maybe, the middle school garden or, greenhouses in schools. When I stumbled upon this today, I, of course, had a plethora of ideas. So, well, we're close to wrapping it up. Any last questions?
I have many, but I'll cut it down to one. I love everything you guys are saying, and I'm very supportive of local producers. But the honest truth is that most of our ag or corporate ag is export crops. So whatever we do here, that's great for our community, but the bigger problem is very large, and it's a global problem. So would some of you be willing to speak to the idea or how we can deal with multiple sources that are saying we have to double food production by 2050 for the globe, and that means corporate ag. That's going to happen. So I'm interested especially in perennial ag, like you probably are familiar with Wes Jackson's work, where he's developing perennial crops where you plant once, harvest many times. But I didn't hear anybody mention that. It's a much, much bigger problem. Yes, we can do things closer to home, but that's just kind of shuffling the deck chairs, in my opinion. Would any of you be willing to address that?
I can address that a tiny bit. What she's asking is saying there's projections that we need to double our food production by 2050.
2050.
And yeah, these are the challenges we're facing in the growing population of feeding it. And the reality is in the world right now is we do have plenty of food to feed everybody. It's a distribution problem. I was just back in Iowa recently, I was listening on the radio, they were talking about global surpluses of corn and soy and stuff, and there's huge surpluses right now. But then there's people starving, you know, I mean, it's ridiculous. So, and another thing she referred to is a place called the Land Institute. It's in Kansas, and they're developing perennial agriculture, working on developing perennial wheat crops. So that's something that you don't need to pour as much fertilizer on, as much herbicides on, because it just stays there. It has really deep roots, it accesses all those nutrients. You don't need to till ever. And that's really important, good work. The unfortunate thing about breeding an annual into a perennial, it takes a really long time and it's extremely complicated.
They've already got one, though, they're producing flour from.
Right.
It's called Kernza. You probably have heard of it.
A sunflower?
I can't remember what it's crossed with, but it's actually producing seed that they can turn into flour.
Right, yeah.
Perennial.
And is that a food source you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And they're doing really important work, it's just that it is slow. And, I mean, we are fully in this corporate food system. It's huge, it's industrialized, and we do export a lot of corn and soy right now. And then we feed the rest of it to animals and feedlots. So, if you can, I mean, it does seem like we're not doing enough by just growing a garden and like buying some eggs from somebody. It does something. I mean, it's better than buying eggs that got, you know, that were in a huge egg production facility in Iowa. I mean, it's a little bit of something. And really in this area, we can produce a lot of good meat. And it's just that the challenge is a lot of people do still ship their cows and stuff off to get finished on GM corn and stuff. So if you can buy meat from producers that are truly grass-fed and close to home, that's good. But yeah, it's a complicated problem. I'm just glad somebody brought that up, that, I mean, we don't have all the answers. And, you know, it feels silly to do a little bit of few things here, but it's better than nothing.
Well, I didn't imply it was silly at all.
Yeah,
I'm just
well,
saying much is
yeah, it's a
bigger,
huge problem,
bigger
yeah.
things. Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you to our speakers. Thank you guys. Thanks for coming. Thanks for caring.